class for gardening for newcomers. Doesn't necessarily mean beginners, although everyone is welcome. The premise of this class is that most of us had learned to garden somewhere else, some other part of the country, or somewhere else. And now we moved here, and conditions are very different for gardening. And so why struggle and learn things the hard way when you can come here and we can share, compare notes, and talk about what it means to be a gardener here. So what we're going to do is run through some of the factors that affect gardening. We're going today's class, we're going to talk about some of the plants and products, some of the practices that we espouse. And then instead of just having us lecture, we're going to also take questions and comments from the audience. And we want to hear about your challenges, your successes, your setbacks, your questions. And of course, we'll always be available after class, one-on-one, to answer any questions. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that we have a monsoon sale going on around here. Somehow you haven't heard about that. We have all the ceramic pottery is on sale, many plants and shrubs. And if you see aspen, for example, over there, and it's got the orange ribbons, those are the plants that are on sale. They're all marked accordingly. So we can help you find those as well. So let's start with the top 10 list, we might say, if there are 10, of what makes gardening challenging here in this area, in our mountain region. First of all, there's a big difference between the daytime and nighttime temperatures that affects plants. For example, we have a beautiful day in the spring and we decide to plant our tomatoes, and then it's 40 the next night and the plants don't like it, so we have to adjust to that. We have the altitude and the sunlight. All these stickers on the plants tell us, okay, shade, full sun. They don't talk about crescent sun. Morning sun is great for our sun-loving plants. Afternoon sun can be sometimes a bit much, can be too much for them. We have the low humidity, lack of rain, almost no humidity sometimes. We plant vegetable shrubs in May, and then June, the wind blows constantly. The humidity is at about 8%, and there's no rain, and there's just persistent, relentless wind and strong sun beating down. For our plants here, they struggle. We try and tend to them. I like to call that the June swoon. That's what happens here sometimes in June. And then, as you know, then usually in April it starts raining, and this year's been a wonderful year, rain-wise for the most part. Michelle and I were caught up there. We were working on some trees a couple summers ago, and the thunder and the lightning was just right above us, just crashed and started pouring. We came in here. Pretty soon, water and mud were roaring through. So you know the routine about the monsoons. But this summer, I think for the most part, they have helped a lot of our plants recover from a really dry winter. And then we have soil. If you actually have soil in your yard, you're fortunate. But it may be crummy soil. Most of us have clay, decomposed granite, caliche, or rocks that is not conducive to growing plants. And so we have mulch and some products that you can use to amend the soil, but just be aware that it can be a challenge. That soil is not like if you gardened in the Midwest and you have 2 feet of wonderful topsoil. Most of us don't have that here. Then some of the other factors are animals. And we're talking about deer, javelina, and rabbits primarily, but gophers and moles, pack rats, they can do a real number on your yard. And this spring, before it started raining, I think rabbits, deer, other animals came into our yard because there really wasn't much growing anywhere else. It was such a dry winter that they came in and ate plants that would normally eat it. I planted a yarrow, supposed to be animal-proof plant. Within 2 days, a rabbit just finished it off down to the ground. And I looked out the window and saw this rabbit, and it was big and fat and everything, and I thought, you know, every night I see coyotes traveling to the neighborhood. So where is one or two, one in each? Because this would have been a great meal for several coyotes. So those are some of the factors. If you have gophers, I mean, we'll talk about some of the animals. There's a whole class that Ken Lane does on just underground animals, and it can be a real challenge in the yard. If you're not fenced in, you're not protected, you're going to be battling the elements, so to speak, the wild elements. And you know how entomologists tell us that insects, just by themselves, get about 60% of the world's plants and crops. And we humans get what's left. And what are we going to do about it? I mean, there's just so many of them. It's a challenge with the 600,000 kinds of beetles, which this is something I learned in Master Gardener class. There are 600,000 kinds of beetles in the world, and these are just the ones that have been identified. They know there are others that they haven't specified and identified and so on. So Michelle, did we cover most of the
elements? Watering conditions are really important here. You do not have to water as often as you think you do. One of the most important questions that I ask when people come in is how much are you watering? You need to know your sprinkler systems and how the volume. It's not about timing, it's the volume of water that you're actually putting on your plants. So if you don't know that, I would say that's one of your first projects to do at your new home, is find out how much your drippers are dripping. So you know, okay, this plant's getting 5 gallons of water, or your trees are getting 20 gallons of water. That's important, because if you don't know how much, you don't know whether your tree's getting watered or not. And a little bit of water doesn't do anything except raise your water bill. Because you want those roots to go very deeply and out, not stay at the top. So if you're one of those waterers that water every day, you're not doing your plants any favors. Unless they're in small pots or, they're smaller things, you would water a little bit often. But your trees and your shrubs, your bigger perennials, every 3 or 4 days is plenty for those. Your trees once a week is plenty, as long as they're getting that amount of volume. I would say any big difference would be in June. I don't know how many of you were here in June. This June wasn't horrible. The June before was awful. We had like 3 weeks of time that we were over 100. And we still had those southwest winds that came in and blew constantly. So we do struggle, but gardening can happen. You just have to pay attention. You need to know how your sprinkler system works, how your soil is, like Doug said, your caliche. Do you have caliche and clay? Do you have decomposed granite? There's a big difference there, because decomposed granite is going to drain really well. Clay and caliche hold that water in, so you don't get that. You don't actually have to water as often because it holds that moisture. So you're not going to be watering as often as you would in a decomposed granite spot. And yes, your holes can be different. Even though they're 6 foot apart, this hole can be decomposed granite. You can have clay in this one. So pay attention when you're digging the holes, or when our crew is digging holes. Find out what kind of soil is in there so you know how to adjust that.
Right, and so many people come in and they'll say, well, how much should I water my tree? And it's really not an easy answer, because it depends on so many factors: what the soil is like, how much sunlight, what kind of plant it is. A lot of times folks will come in and they'll say, I'm having a problem with something or other, a tree or a shrub. One of the first things we ask is, how often do you water? And so yesterday, this happens all the time, the gentleman said, well, I do just fine. I have an aspen tree and I water it for 5 minutes every day. So I said, okay, we don't need to go any farther than that. There's the problem right there. A tree like that could be watered once every 7 or 10 days with a slow drip, not 5 minutes. 5 minutes doesn't do anything any good in your garden. And then another thing that was fairly common this spring is we found out when people came in and said my evergreens don't look good and so on. And as you recall, we had a very, very dry winter. So the question is, did you water during the winter? The answer was no, I didn't know that I should. You should. If we have a winter like last winter, you don't have any precipitation for a month. You should be out there watering in the winter time. Maybe just once a month, maybe twice if it's really warm and dry. But the plants and trees will not do well if they have no water at all through the winter. It doesn't matter, it can be chilly. So that being said, we often find that the tendency is for folks to overwater. They'll take pine trees like we have over here and water them too much. And Michelle said that clay soil, if you don't have good drainage, you have a problem. So these are all things to kind of research and try and determine what's it like, what are your growing conditions in your yard. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, let's go back to the early planting season. We recommend that you don't plant your vegetables till probably Mother's Day. And that means the tomatoes, basil, peppers, eggplant, all those warm weather crops. And people, grab them anyway and try and plant them. And I find that if you put them in the ground a little bit early, it may get cold, they might die, or they could just do nothing. They can just sit there and sort of like they're in neutral almost. And I found almost every year I plant basil because I'm supposed to bring in a big basil crop to make pesto. And the whole month of June I just water these plants every single day, pick the flowers and so on, and they grow slowly. But you know what I am unable to provide to them is humidity. I can't give them any humidity. As soon as the monsoons come along, this basil just kind of mushrooms and blossoms. So that's a big factor. The humidity that we've had for the last couple of months may have been a little bit uncomfortable some of the time, but for the most part, it sure has been great for the plants. Some plants have gotten some mildew or fungus, nothing that could not be treated. And so humidity is the friend of our plants because we don't have much here. Michelle, do you want to talk about frost dates and so on?
Yeah. So in the springtime, our frost date is Mother's Day, typically. So you don't want to plant before that on your hot season vegetables, your tomatoes, your peppers, your cucumbers, beans, that type of thing. Now, if you want to plant your onions, your lettuce, your kales, your chard, all of that, you can put that in March, April. They like those cold temperatures. You can even start from seed with those cold temperatures. So kind of know what you want and start a calendar or a planner so okay, my peas and lettuce and radish and carrots and all that stuff go in March. Your tomatoes, your peppers go in towards the end of May. Tomatoes don't like temperatures under 50, so keep that in mind. And that's soil temperature, so you have to have time for that ground to heat up. During the summer, like you said, June is kind of detrimental. We need to create places for our vegetables. If you get too much sun or you don't have any shade, basically the people that are in Prescott Valley, we don't have a lot of trees down there, so we kind of have to help things a little bit. Once you have trees, Prescott here in the city, you can pretty much do a lot of stuff because you have some shady spots where they don't get that hot all day long sun. So you have a little bit of advantage over us lower valley folks. Fruit trees do really well in both areas. They're one of the ones that do produce all the time. Peaches, they usually tend to get frosted out as far as the flowers go, so you don't get fruit all the time. But the trees do well, and every other season you usually will get a crop. Apples, pears, cherries usually are pretty more reliable as far as actually fruiting every year.
So Michelle mentioned things to do at different times of the year in the garden. And if you go to the Waters website, we have this Garden Talks garden calendar. And you can just print that, and it lists for every month what you should be doing that month in the garden. It's very helpful because gardening is a year-round thing. In the wintertime, we're pruning, cleaning up the leaves, that sort of thing. And is this something that you can attach to an email, Ken, or just?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to mention. The sheet that's going around for those of you that don't attend the classes all the time. What we do is we send out a copy of the video, and we'll put various handouts like that one in it on Thursday. There's a newsletter that goes out on Thursday that you'll receive. So if you sign up, or if you're already signed up, you should be getting this stuff now.
Right. So you can look for this on an email with the garden calendar, and just give you kind of a reminder of what to do throughout the year. Another thing I wanted to talk about is, back to the soils here. I know we kind of make fun of the rock and the clay and that sort of thing, but the other aspect about soils in this area is that they're very alkaline, high in the alkaline scale. And we have plants here like hydrangeas. People love hydrangeas, and camellias, rhododendrons, blueberries. They are acid-loving plants. So for a lot of people, they decided they're just going to forego the struggle with the native soil, and they'll go container gardening. And like these beautiful ceramic pots that we have, or raised, beds, wooden beds, whatever they are, you can have a very successful garden in a raised bed, in large pots. And it's easier to control the balance of acidity and alkalinity in your soil. If you start out with potting soil, you're not dealing with the high alkaline, high salt soil that we have. And there's another class that Lisa Lane does on container garden. It's a really great class. And by the way, all these classes are on YouTube videos. So you can, Ken has archived literally hundreds of them. So if you want to look up, just thinking about maybe I want fruit trees in my yard. Okay, there's one on fruit trees. There's one on berries, grapes, and that sort of thing. Or if there's a class next week and you can't be here, it will be there archived. And today's class, as Ken mentions, within the week or two, you'll get an email, that'll be there as well. So it's just a constant resource. These garden talk little tutorials, 1 or 2 pages, they're great, they're short and to the point. They can answer a lot of questions and direct you and help you out in whatever ways. And there are also hundreds of these as well. There's also a question and answer section of our website where if you can't get in here, you send an email, and I understand it's usually answered pretty promptly about what to do. And I find some of the topics to be pretty interesting. So, do we want to talk about planting, how to plant, or do you want to talk about this?
Either way.
Okay, let's talk just briefly. And first of all, a lot of folks come in now and they'll say, is this a good time to plant? And the answer, of course, is yes, it's a wonderful time to plant. I mean, the air is still warm, the ground is probably warm and moist. And so any plant that's put in the ground, perennial tree, what have you, it's going to get a chance to get started. You want to get started before winter comes, because if you put something in the ground in spring, and I know everybody gets excited, springtime gardeners, get the urge to start working. That's fine, but you know how springtime weather can be very variable here. It can be cold, it can be warm. Plants are adjusting to it. Then the winds will start to kick in after a while. Fall is a little bit of a calmer time. Warm days, cool nights. So yes, the answer is always yes. September, October, probably the best times of the year to plant. Now, how to plant? Let's say you decide to take a shrub home today. We always recommend that you dig a hole that is only as deep as the root ball, but about 2 or 3 times as wide. And then that you also amend the soil with a Waters garden mulch, thin mixture, mostly native soil, a little bit of this organic. This is like putting compost into the hole where you're planting, because since our soils have basically no nutrients whatsoever. Organic matter, however you do it, whether you top dress it, sprinkle it, put it in the ground, or you're planting, you can almost never have too much organic matter in your soil, whatever it is. If you compost periodically, you can turn that into your vegetable garden, whatever you're doing, that all works well. So, Michelle, do you want to talk about these plants here and the products or anything?
So with our calendars, there are certain times of the year to get things done. I imagine all of you have a problem with weeds right now. With the monsoons, everything popped up. We have weeds that we don't even know what they are, that we haven't seen in years because the monsoons have been so well, or have given us so much rain. So there is a product, it's pre-emergent. Mark your calendars for January. That's the next time that you want to put that down. Once the weeds are up, it doesn't do any good. But what a pre-emergent does is it creates a barrier so the seeds of the weeds don't come up. And it won't let them germinate. So January and June are the 2 months that you want to get that down. A lot of us have rock in our driveway, in our yards. Get it down before the rains come. Get them down before February, March, when they start popping up again. Your dandelions and some of your other broadleaf weeds come up usually end of February, early March. So if you get it down before that, you're going to keep that weed problem to a minimum. If you have them now, you can spray. There are organic methods. I have found that the organic methods take a little bit more time to actually work, and they work better if you don't cut them down first. They like that stuff on the leaves to actually absorb, go down to the roots. So you have to be patient with some of them. So a lot of us just mow them down. The trick is you want to get the seed heads off of those, or rake it up, get rid of it, because if you leave the seed heads there, you're just asking yourself for some extra trouble. Did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, on your pre-emergent, is that liquid or granular?
It's granular.
Granular?
Okay. You just put it on with the broadcast spreader, so either hand or a brush.
Thank you.
So, hang on a second. I just want to repeat the question. We asked about the consistency of the pre-emergent. It is a granular product, and I wanted to add also that it's important that that be watered in pretty thoroughly. You can't just sit on the surface. It's got to break down somewhat. And for those of us that have a yard, that has rock and then maybe weed block underneath, it can take a little while to get that worked in. When I put pre-emergent in last winter, it was the day that I also fertilized. It was the day that I realized I hadn't watered in a long time. So I did all three at one time. So I just put all the fertilizer pre-emergent in the areas of the yard I wanted. And then I went around with a long sprinkler hose, those little round things that shoots way up in the air. And I just turn it on full blast, and it would get like a couple of 4 or 5 trees. I'd leave it here for maybe 10 or 15 minutes and pull the hose somewhere else. So, and the other thing that's good I found about the pre-emergent, because I've been using it for a couple of years, is I think it has a cumulative effect. If you use it every year, you start to build up something in the soil that helps the weeds from coming up. As Michelle said, will do nothing for the existing weeds. It sure is nice if it keeps weeds from popping up. And I found this year I've had fewer weeds, and I'm maybe in the second or third year of using the pre-emergent product. I figure, okay, if I haven't had weeds too bad this year, this should be a really healthy year for weeds, and so far it hasn't been too difficult.
Planting, we are going into fall, so our geraniums and our petunias are getting thrown out of our pots. We can add, or the snapdragons. Towards the end of next week, we will have pansies and a lot more mums. We have mums. Right now I have 2 colors of mums, and they're ready to pop. We have yellow and orange. Next week, we will have every color under the rainbow. So get ready for fall, your fall colors. You can really dress up your patios, your garden beds with annuals. And most of your annuals, especially your snapdragons, your pansies, will survive through the winter. It might knock them down. Your snapdragons won't bloom when we're super cold, but as soon as February comes, they're going to bloom and be really pretty. So you did that until it's petunia time again.
The other thing I wanted to mention about existing new stuff that's in here, just over my left shoulder, I'm not going to turn over so I don't do feedback. We have a lot of the cool season crops that you can plant now. We've got lettuce, chard, spinach. I'm not going to turn around and look over there, but it's just over there. You can plant those now, and pretty soon you'll have, like I planted a whole bunch of red romaine lettuce last year. I would just go out every couple of days, pull 2 or 3 leaves off each plant, and there was the salad for the night, and it was pretty good. It was good flavor. I had to keep ahead of the birds. They liked the Swiss chard more than the lettuce. That was okay. I let them have that. I figured, okay, sometimes you just have to accept that you're going to be sharing part of your yard with the animals. As long as they get about 2% and you get the rest, I'm okay living with that. Some heavily that comes in and uproots a plant and creates sort of collateral damage. That's when most of us get kind of unhappy and discouraged.
Put holes in it? And what do you do with it?
Okay, so the question is about if you're having a home build in new homes, contractors will put down either plastic or a weed fabric of some kind, and is that impervious to water? Plastic, I think, is not a good idea because water is not going to travel through plastic. But this thick fabric weed block that you see in a lot of yards, water will flow through there, and fertilizer if you can get it to mix with the water and break down. It's good, but it doesn't last forever because eventually what happens is, say you have your rocks and you've got your weed block here, soil will sort of settle in and weeds can still germinate within that area a little bit over a period of time. But I think that in general, I think it's a good idea because one thing some gardening tour I hate, and I think we all do, is just having to bend over for weeds. And so there's different schools of thought about that, but I would say fabric rather than plastic is the way to go.
Yeah, because my theory is don't waste your money because the weeds are going to be there anyway. They might be a little bit easier to pull, but if you stay on top of the pre-emergent, you won't have as many weeds.
Right. And the thing is that in many communities, the HOA requires that weed block be part of the landscaping, so you don't have too much choice. But you could maybe choose a house where the HOA doesn't require that. And as I say, there are different schools of thought about whether that's even a good idea. I found in my yard it's worked pretty well. Weeds haven't become an overwhelming task. So I think we have a question over here.
Yes, would you include milkweed in your conversation?
Absolutely. I'm not an expert on milkweed. Milkweed or butter? The weed milkweed?
I guess my question is, what do you grow in such flowers to get the butterflies?
Okay.
Will it last over the winter?
Her question was about the milkweed that the monarchs and the butterflies like to eat. Does it survive the winter? Basically, it depends on what variety you have. We sell a wide variety. The red and yellow that are down in the lower house right now are annuals. You can harvest the seeds, you can reseed that way, but they will not come back. They're an annual here. On a couple of the benches that are out, there is a perennial one. So we try to keep a bunch of different varieties so we could have a little bit of everything. If anybody wants to learn about milkweed and monarch butterflies, I suggest coming in anywhere from Sunday till Wednesday. Patty is our monarch butterfly queen. She actually goes through and she collects the chrysalis. She tags the monarchs as they come out of the chrysalis. She has a lot of interesting information. So if you have some spare time, come talk to Patty. She's awesome.
And Patty would love to talk with you about milkweed because it's one of her favorite subjects. I think she has about 25 or 30 plants. If she gets a tag of monarch, it's like she's died and gone to heaven. So, you know, she really cares about the subject, and she's a cashier, so in between customers you can chat with her, and she's a great source of information for that. Any other questions?
I think we should open it up. If you guys have questions or concerns or problems that come up, I'm sure you're not alone, so you can share them. Yes, ma'am.
We're building a house, so our yard is a blank slate. The people who are putting the landscaping in the front yard put just for the timer, they just have one for the front yard and one for the backyard, and they say, oh, that's plenty for all trees and shrubs. That doesn't sound right to me, is that right?
Her question, she's getting a new house built, and the landscaper's putting one timer for the front and one for the back. If you have the time and the money and you have the space for it to be installed, I suggest to fit in a couple of timers, or a valve, I guess is how that works. So your trees, your stuff that's going to take a lot of water and longer time will, so you can run those longer. There's nothing worse than having your trees and your shrubs and your perennials all on one. If that is the case, I suggest you kind of take a look and find out what your greater evil is. If you just have a couple of trees, it might be beneficial just to hand water or something like that.
A dozen trees.
Yeah. So you might want to be the other person and run it for the trees, and then just hand water your smaller stuff.
This is a real challenge because you'll find that, you know, most gardening contractors will come in and they want to do the easiest thing. It's, okay, one line here, one line there. The problem is that over here and over here, there are trees and shrubs all on the same line, as Michelle mentioned. This is what's going on in my yard as well. One way to try and approach that is, for example, around the trees, maybe you put in several emitters. Because when trees get larger, they're going to need more than one emitter. And then you can get emitters that, that emit more water. And so then, like around small flowers, maybe one emitter, a gallon per hour, that sort of thing. So this, you can probably get help. We have a list of suppliers that we work with and we recommend, and there's one fellow there that has come to my house and helped me with some of these questions and emitters. He doesn't do installations, he just comes in and helps them adjust. And so if you got a great big tree with a bunch of flowers, they should not be getting the same amount of water. But short of redoing the whole system, you can try and make adjustments with emitters and how much water they generate.
There was a class that Ken did about, and I learned because I moved into a house that has way too many of those things emitters all over the place. And he was saying that they're just really a supplement that really need to hand water. So that's what I pretty much do when we haven't had the rains. There's a lot of, like you said, the drip on the tree, it moves. Just a lot of deep watering and not as frequent. And I thought the drip was just a supplement.
So the question was about the drip system and how you view it. Is it the primary source of water for your plants, or as came out of one class, is it just supplemental? I'd like to believe, I'd probably disagree with Ken about that. I would think that the drip for me is the main source of water. I want to program it, I want to test the system every year, fix it if it needs to be fixed, that is emitters that might be buried underground, and just let it go. Now, supplemental water, certainly in the month of June when it's really hot, maybe occasionally a tree can get supplemental from a drip hose. The worst thing to me, I think, is you're standing with a hose in your hand and trying to decide you're going to water every plant in your yard. It's not going to happen because most of us are going to get bored and walk away after a while. But you can turn on an emitter, a little sprinkler, go do something else, come back to it. But I think, in my opinion, the drip system ought to be your source of water for the trees. Now, this summer I've turned off my drip because we've had so much rain, but it's going to go back on fairly soon.
Yes, ma'am.
When you use brush killer, pre-emergent, or any of those killers, how close are you able to use that to your well? Do you know? what they say? I don't know what the beach is.
Yeah, her question was how close do you want to put leaf tiller and pre-emergence to your well? Me, myself, I would try to keep it as far away from my well as I possibly can. It kind of depends on your well and how deep it is. I would just kind of assume that area is one of those that I'm going to pull, just to be on the safe side. Or use a vinegar solution, which is the burnout.
I think we have another question over here. Yes, ma'am?
When you turn your drip system off in the winter, should you focus on watering the trees? Because, I know Ken has said in the past that the pine trees and non-deciduous trees need to be watered.
Yes, so the question is, in the wintertime, after you've turned off your drip system, what do you focus on when you're going to water? And yes, trees would definitely be an item. They say you're on a once a month schedule in the wintertime to water because we've had maybe a moderate amount of rainfall. Trees could use once a month, maybe an hour with a soaker. Perennial plants, maybe a little bit less, but definitely trees. I think a lot of trees just dried out last winter because there just wasn't any moisture, and even though they can be kind of dormant, some of them, they still need some water. Yeah, I would concentrate on trees.
And with that, your evergreen trees, they are the ones that lose the most moisture because they continue to grow in the winter. You've got this lush green tree, it loses moisture. So your evergreen trees, you're going to water more than your deciduous. Anything that loses its leaves, basically you're just keeping that root system moist. So they're not going to need a ton of water. You're going to water a lot more on your evergreens.
So I see the gentleman with a Stanford shirt on there. That's the question. Whenever I see one of those, is that a Stanford shirt?
I guess so.
Yeah. Whenever I see that, I always say "Go Bears." Having lived in the Bay Area, gone to the big games, all that kind of stuff. Just in good fun. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. Question.
We're new to the area, and we have a place at Dewey with 5 mature maple trees. Each of them about 8 or 10 feet apart. Some of them seem to be, some of them are more green and a little yellower. I'm just not sure. Is that something we should be concerned about?
So the question.
Good. His question was, he has a row of maple trees that are, some are green, some are turning yellow. When your trees turn yellow like that, it's lack of food. This area, our soil, has very little nutrients in it. And what nutrients are in it, because of our high pH, the trees just can't suck it up. So that's why you need to fertilize. We fertilize here in Prescott 3 times a year on your deciduous plants and 4 times a year for your evergreens. So we tell you to remember your holidays. New Year's for your evergreens, Easter for everything else, 4th of July, right before the monsoons, and Halloween. So those are your 4 months or 4 holidays to remember on your food. With your food feeding, make sure you're putting the right amount on your trees. So the way the all-purpose works, it's 2 cups per inch of caliper chest height or diameter. So if your tree is like this, it's a good 2 or 3 inches. You're going to put 6 cups. That goes along the drip line, which are furthest branches of your trees. With that being said, with your watering and your drip system, as your trees and shrubs grow, that drip system that's sitting next to your trunk isn't doing any good. You need to move those out. So if you have a 20-foot tree, that's where you should be watering, about 1 foot, 18 inches inside that drip line. Go ahead.
What is the nexus between water volume and age of plants and trees? You've got well-established shrubs. 10, 15 years old. Do they need as much water as newer ones?
Probably not. His question was, do more mature trees need as much water as younger ones? Probably not on that case, because they do have that well-established drip system. That being said, with our drought, you'll notice that those trees and shrubs that we ignored are suffering because of the winter drought that we had last year. We were so warm and so dry for so long. Pinions and the oaks didn't even start getting leaves until the end of June, early July. So water is very important. Even though they're established, they still need moisture to keep them going. Yes, ma'am.
Could I bring some soil in for somebody to look at and tell me what I need?
Her question was about soil testing, and we do that here. If you can bring it in and leave it for a day or two, we'll be happy to call you with the results. When you bring that soil in, what I would suggest you do is take samples from different areas and put it in that bag so you can kind of get a well-rounded. Or if you want to do it yourself, we do have kits that you can do. A lot of the times it's going to say you have very high pH, which is what we have. But it'll tell you other things in there. We test for nitrogen and some other ingredients on there too. Yes, ma'am.
I need turf and then some natural, I think they're oaks, I don't know what they are. They're not too tall, maybe 10 feet high. Now do I just fertilize, what do I do with that artificial turf? I just fertilize through that or what?
Her question is how to fertilize with the artificial turf. The tree is in it.
Yeah.
I would think, I guess I would need to know, does water go through it when it rains?
I think so.
So you should be able to do that. You should be able to sprinkle it on there and just water it in there. Because I'd hate for you to have to pull it up and then fertilize. Yeah.
Do bulbs grow in the caliche clay?
Her question was, do bulbs grow in the caliche clay? I'm assuming you're talking about like tulip bulbs. Yeah, they do. Everything has to get used to where we're at. So that's why we amend to help them as they're young. But pretty much anywhere unless you're in the farm belt in the Midwest where you can spit a seed out and you have a tree. You need to amend the soil, bone meal, to get the root system going, and you'll be good to go.
If I could add to that, some bulbs don't have to be planted very deeply, and so it helps. Like I recently separated my irises; they only need to be in about 3 inches of soil. So to me, that's wonderful because I don't really feel like digging through clay and rock. I just sprinkle in some. I think I use potting soil, which happens in my hand. I said to the iris, here's your new environment. Hope you like it. But I'm not going to rototill the ground. It's just too much work for me. There's some things that you learn about gardening, try and avoid the really difficult tasks. Like Michelle was talking about, the all-purpose fertilizer, and so many ounces per trunk of tree. And a lot of people want to be really precise about that. And I've got a general idea about how much fertilizer ought to be thrown at a tree or a shrub, and I'll just walk around and do it by hand because I don't feel like doing math in the garage. I just like to get the job done. So I call it the Johnny Appleseed method. It seems like a lot of people here like that idea, and so it's just larger trees get more than smaller trees, the vegetables, etc. And I have to say that everything is doing pretty well. I think that the fertilizer has definitely helped everything. So like anything in life, there's more than one way to skin the cat, you might say.
And when should you use soil sulfur? Something that applies sulfur?
So the question is how and when to use soil sulfur. Michelle, you want to handle that one?
Sulfur is a product that helps lower our pH. Let me step back. Helps lower the pH of our soils. And it also adds color to our flowers and shrubs. October is an awesome time for use with the maples. If you have hydrangeas, blueberries, any of that, it'll soak in there and get ready for the springtime. Spring is the other time that you put it on there, just to bring them out. Sulfur also helps, gypsum, sorry. Gypsum will help break up that clay for those of you that have that heavy, dense clay soil. Gypsum's really good to use.
Any other questions?
We have some multi-trunk aspen trees that were put in about 4 months ago, and they seem to be, the leaves are brownish yellow, and we water them about every other day. And if somebody across the street used the same landscaping contractor, and they're having the same problem, but even worse, it's more dried out.
Okay, so the question is about aspens, relatively new aspens, I assume, and they are, the leaves are turning brown and yellow. And I think aspens have had kind of a difficult summer in general, but your first comment, I think you might want to back off on the watering a little bit, especially with all the rain that we've had. I'd say maybe once a week, deep root watering might be helpful. The all-purpose fertilizer, if you haven't used that, that's a good thing to use. And then, well, Michelle, what did you discover about aspens?
What I've discovered here is that depending on where you live and how much extra our winds and our conditions, aspens don't like it here. If you have, or if you're up in this area, you know, where you have some pine trees and some established trees, you can definitely plant them because it blocks down some of our winds, our drying winds, our hot sun. If you're down in Prescott Valley, in Dewey, don't plant an aspen. There are a lot of other trees that will do so much better for you down there. Basically, the trees that we get in every year, they end up with a brown edge around the leaf. It's just because we can't water them enough to keep them happy. It's so hot and so dry, we just can't, they're just not happy. So extra water in June when we're not getting any moisture. Feed them properly. If you can get them healthy, they can handle that dryness a little bit better. But getting them established, everybody goes through that.
Is there some kind of fertilizers that can burn plants?
Her question is about, I'm sorry, fertilizers that burn. It depends on the fertilizer. If you're using ours, it's a slow release. It's not going to burn your plants. If you're using some synthetics, they can. The higher the nitrogen level on your fertilizers, the more often it's going to burn on you.
So then, just to follow up, the fertilizer that we have is there's no chemicals in there.
I was thinking about the brown tips on the tree.
Yeah, that could be from fertilizer. Back to the aspens, it's kind of a dilemma, right? Because they are beautiful trees, and you know it's so beautiful to see them fluttering in the wind. But I believe that we are, in some ways, probably kind of on the cusp of where they're going to do well. If you look to the north rim of the Grand Canyon or the forest in Flagstaff, the aspens are just doing great. They're huge trunks and they're growing with the ponderosa pines, and they're doing really well. And here they can't struggle in the heat. I have to tell you that in my backyard I've got 3 clumps of 3. They're about 10 years old. They're doing really nicely, but they're on the north side of the house. They get some afternoon sun. They do block the wind in the afternoon, but I've been fortunate enough to avoid that browning around the edges and yellow leaves. Sometimes, as Michelle's mentioned, yellow leaves, you know, is a sign of a lack of food. The fertilizer can be in order. And for a number of reasons, I think the spot where mine were planted, they're doing really well. And then, you know, they did kind of dry out, but I have a swale that runs in front of them. So I have to believe that when that water passes through, some of it sinks down, and they're getting plenty of water. But it's, you know, aspens are great. they may be a little difficult in this environment. And I think the higher altitude where you're located, where your garden is, the better chance of success you're going to have.
I would thought that this could be grown, put into the ground with water. Does that apply up here from the valley?
Go ahead.
We have, remember the handout I showed you about the calendar, some days and months of the year? We have one about watering, and it talks about that. So the answer is yes. Her question was about probing the soil to determine the level of moisture. A lot of times, if you have, say you have a foot of moisture around your tree because you watered 2 days ago, usually when that water stops and the soil below there is dry, anything you put in there, like a tool or even a piece of rebar, will probably stop at the dry soil. So then you can pull it out and say, oh, I've got 10 inches of irrigated soil, but I just put a tree in and the root ball was this big. So obviously you haven't reached down as far as you should. We have this water handout is really interesting because it goes into more detail about how you can test that. The concept is basically that, so that you put something in the ground, you observe, make a calculation, and then you can adjust if necessary, because if the end of the bottom of the root ball is not getting water on your tree, it's not going to be a healthy tree eventually.
Other than the yarrow you mentioned, what are some other critter plants and fruit bedding or really anywhere that they just don't like?
The plants that animals don't like, the only really sure things I think are anything that's herbal. And so that means rosemary, lavender, sage, basil, herbs, anything that's herbal, that the taste and the smell is probably going to be too strong for most animals. You know, it's nice, our palate's too strong for theirs. When I had my javelina attack, they went into a bed and ate a pepper plant and ignored 10 basil plants that were just big and lush. They didn't even touch one. So they uprooted the tomato plant and threw the screen, the cage all over the place. So I think that's a good start. And anything that's herbal, we've got some rosemary over here. We've got plenty of sage. Those are all good bets. Okay. And we have back to our handouts. We have one for javelina, and we have one for deer and rabbits, and it's a pretty long list. And the problem is getting the animals to read these lists and buy them. They don't always do that. I mean, this year it says they won't eat my yarrow, but they did. Somebody did.
Catmint's on there too, and loaded down.
Is a birch tree or a poplar a better choice than an aspen? Do they handle the weather here?
Her question was, does a birch tree or a poplar work better than an aspen? And the answer is yes. For some reason, they can handle it. Like I said, if you think about aspens, where do you usually see them? In the mountains. And so, yeah, we're a mile high, but we have such intense, and there's that lack of humidity thing is the biggest deterrent for our aspens.
Grasshoppers, real big, real hungry.
Yes, they are. And so,
besides stomping on them, what else could I do?
Well, I once was riding my bike on the Peavine Trail, and there was a migration across the trail, you know, and I thought, well, I could avoid these and crash my bike, or I could just run over them and crush. I mean, who was going to be injured, right? The grasshoppers and not me. Now, grasshoppers are definitely a problem, and in the past, you know, we've used Nolo bait. It's a good product. There's a slight problem in that the Nolo factory burned down, but we have another product that has the same ingredients. So there's a short window of opportunity when you can use this product and to deal with the grasshoppers.
Yeah, we ordered it a couple weeks ago and it just hasn't come in yet. So I don't know if there's a problem with the order. Lisa is on vacation and she's the one that put the order in. So we don't know whether communication is there. So I apologize for that. But keep checking back. Like I said, we did get it on order. The Nolo baits don't work very well on the big guys. If you want to spray, the multi-purpose insect spray works pretty good. It's a contact killer, so you actually kind of just spray that whole area. And it will, usually they'll hop a couple of times and usually they will die. Some of the bigger ones are a little tougher. But usually you can get them that way. If you are interested in the Semaspore, which is a new product that we have in, just keep checking back. If you're far away, give us a call and we can let you know whether it's come in. That works on little ones better than the bigger ones.
Also, I understand that chickens really like the grasshoppers. So, they can circle around the yard and they know they're coming into the vegetable garden, for example, right?
Anybody have some chickens I can borrow?
What's the short window you said for treating?
Usually there's on the NOAA bait or the Semaspore, there is a window of time where it is active. And usually it's a 2 month period. So from the time it's manufactured to when you can actually put it on.
Do you wait until you see them?
You want to put it down while it's active, because they're out there whether you can see them or not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was a
Usually by
springtime thing.
April, your grasshoppers are starting. May at the latest.
See, the way this product works, the grasshopper product, it is a kind of a virus that's in the product. The grasshoppers ingest this and interferes with their digestion, right? They can't eat or drink any longer. So eventually they die, and then other grasshoppers eat the dead ones and they get the virus. The virus has a window of opportunity, so to speak, right? So it's not as though you could just keep it in your gardening shed for 2 years and try it again next season. It's a virus that has a shelf life, but that's the way it works essentially.
Any questions? As far as seasonality, like Doug said, now's a great time to plant trees. We have some gorgeous autumn blaze maples out there. They're close to 20 foot tall. So if you guys are looking for a absolute great shade tree that's already a shade tree, I have some for you. Take a look around. We're all around, so ask us questions. We're here for you.
And if you don't want to plant them yourself, we'll plant them for you.
Right. What he just said was, if you don't want to plant them, we have some nice, strong people that can get out there and plant them for you.
Well, be sure and water them during the winter. Lost some nice people this winter, this spring, because I didn't water it during the winter.
Yeah, it's sad but true.
Winter watering is very, very important here. Every 2 weeks, if we don't get any significant rainfall, snowfall, and significant snowfall, 6 inches of snow is 1 inch of water. So take that in effect. Also, January, December is that champagne powder people like to ski on. There's not a lot of moisture content in it. So winter water. People in Prescott Valley, you don't necessarily have to turn your sprinkler systems off because we don't get cold enough here for it. Well, here I would continue to close it off because it does get colder up here. Anything?
Okay, so the question is about planting a blueberry bush in the ground. And yes, that can be done, but you're going to need to amend the soil on a regular basis with sulfur to try and keep the alkalinity down. The blueberry bush wants to live in an acid soil. And some people struggle with that, some succeed. A lot of people just decide, okay, I'm just going to put my blueberry bush in a pot or a planter, and then I can use potting soil. It's easier to control the alkalinity of the soil.
And if you can, give it some afternoon shade. It'll be much happier. Yes, ma'am.
Putting a blueberry in a pot, could we bury the pot so that it's not above ground? Could we bury that and then put them in there? Because I want to put in two.
You could, yeah, if you wanted to. If you're going to put it in a pot, I would just leave it. That way you don't have to dig a hole.
Well, I want it to go down. And I want it to be ground up Okay, so could I go ahead and put it in a pot, a great big like a whiskey barrel, and knock the bottom out just to roll it a little bit?
Sure.
We have some lilac bushes, and I noticed that they didn't bloom for very long this year. Is that typical? I mean, it seemed like the flowers were there for a few days.
2 days. So the question is about lilacs that didn't bloom for very long. I'm not sure why that happened. You know, it could be are they being watered, are they being fertilized, are they past their prime? It's really hard to know. Are they attacked by bugs? I mean, you might, you know, what you could do is if there's something like brown leaves or anything that looks unhealthy, you could take a little clipping, bring it in here, the microscope that we talked about, projects up on the computer screen, and it helps us to sometimes identify what the problem is. That's a possibility. Or, you know, we had, last spring we had these bloomerangs, which were lilacs that bloomed once in the spring and once in the summer, if all goes well. It was kind of a new type of lilac.
So lilacs only bloom, I got, in my new house, I have established lilacs, and they're new to me, and they just bloom once, so is that what they do?
Most lilacs only bloom once.
Okay.
The other thing that could, seasonality and the weather conditions can do, you know, change effect of flowers. A lot of things did not perform as well as they usually do because of the winter drought, and we didn't get very cold last year. So that really has an effect on especially your lilacs, because they need that cold temperatures to bloom.
So we're going to end the show today. We're available to answer questions, speak with you one-on-one, but our director has given me the sign to end the program. Thank you so much.